Intellectual disability is a developmental condition that is diagnosed when a child has significant difficulties that impact on their day-to-day lives in intellectual functioning and adaptive behaviour. This includes conceptual understanding, social abilities and self-care abilities. Psychologists assess intellectual skills using cognitive tests that provide an IQ score. The IQ score of an average child is around 100, and the normal range is between 85 and 115. Did you know that it's estimated that around 1.5 million people in the UK have an intellectual disability? There are a number of causes for intellectual disabilities. These include genetic causes, for example, Down syndrome, complications during pregnancy, for example, fetal alcohol syndrome or Zika virus, and complications during birth or after birth, for example, lack of oxygen. These all have an impact on a developing brain. The development of the brain is a highly organised process in terms of the specialisation, maturation and survival of neurons. Genes and environmental factors can impact these processes, leading to altered brain structures and cognitive functioning. Let's talk about common misconceptions about learning and individuals with intellectual disabilities. It is commonly believed that the learning outcomes of those with intellectual disabilities cannot be improved by education, or that those with intellectual disabilities cannot learn anything complex, such as reading. In both cases, this is not true. Around 70% of individuals with intellectual disabilities develop at least functional levels of reading, and although the learning process might be slower, with good education, children with intellectual disabilities continue to learn new skills and knowledge. These neuromyths relate to a number of misconceptions about the brain. Firstly, they relate to the belief that the brain is static, meaning that once a particular area of the brain is affected, there cannot be any learning or compensation taking place. Secondly, there are misconceptions about sensitive periods of neuroplasticity. During the first few months of life, many synaptic connections are created between the neurons in the brain, far more than exist in adulthood. In the first few years of life, many of these connections are pruned, suggesting that the first few years are important for learning and brain stimulation. As learning tends to be slower in those with intellectual disabilities, some learning might need to take place outside of these sensitive periods of neuroplasticity, which has led to the incorrect belief that their learning will be limited. However, it has been shown that the brain is plastic rather than static, and able to form new connections and learn new things throughout the lifespan. For example, London taxi drivers obtain a very detailed map of London in their mind through experience. Studies have demonstrated that London taxi drivers have an enlarged hippocampus, an area of the brain important for spatial memory, providing a striking example of neuroplasticity in later life. So although early childhood experiences are very important for ongoing development, the capacity to form new synaptic connections is not limited to the first 3 years of life. Recent research has shown that there are many changes that take place in the brain during puberty. Another relevant neuromyth is the belief that what a child with intellectual disabilities can understand can be measured by what they can say. Indeed, many individuals with intellectual disabilities have communication difficulties. However, they often have uneven cognitive profiles, meaning that they have some abilities that are stronger compared to other abilities that are weaker. For example, individuals with Down syndrome might have significant expressive language difficulties compared to stronger language comprehension abilities, meaning that a child with Down syndrome is likely to understand far more than what they can communicate. As learning is often assessed in a way that depends heavily on expressive language and communication, children with intellectual disabilities and expressive language difficulties are often underestimated in their ability to learn complex cognitive tasks. So how can we support individuals with intellectual disabilities when they're learning? There are a number of teaching practices and interventions that are useful. One of them is systematic and explicit instruction with feedback and manipulatives to make problems more concrete. Emphasizing the capabilities and strengths of individuals with intellectual disabilities can result in more positive attitudes and better outcomes. Students with intellectual disabilities benefit from cognitive and metacognitive strategies and scaffolding. For example, when solving a mathematical problem, break the problem down into smaller steps or subproblems. Many individuals with intellectual disabilities have uneven cognitive profiles, As such, it is recommended to regularly assess these profiles and focus on strengths to overcome areas of difficulty. But let's remember about differentiation between groups and alternative assessments. For example, although read-aloud strategies have been successfully used to teach a variety of subject areas for both students with and without disabilities, silent reading may facilitate better reading outcomes compared to oral reading for groups with expressive language difficulties, including those with Down syndrome. In sum, with exposure and training, people with intellectual disabilities are able to learn new skills and improve their educational outcomes. Dispelling neuromyths is a first step to enabling children with intellectual disabilities to reach their full educational potential. That's why you, by watching this video, are helping right now. Thank you for your attention, and don't hesitate to check out another of our videos.